Hello, everyone. I'm Surya Gulagani, Director Marketing here at DataGaps, and thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Before we get started, we have a couple of quick housekeeping comments. First, we have muted all mics to avoid unintended distractions. Next, the chat room is open, so you can interact with us through the chat. For everyone's information, this webinar is getting recorded, and every registrant will get a copy of the recording once the webinar is completed. Today, in this webinar, we will be introducing one of our pioneer products, that is BI Validator, and also learn how you can automate your Power BI testing using BI Validator. On the panel today, we have David Small, our VP of Sales and Marketing at DataGaps, Mr. Shubhanshu Dikshit, Product Manager at DataGaps. And here is our agenda for today. We will have a quick overview of DataGaps. Next, we will talk about what is BI Validator and how and where this is useful and how it helps automate your BI testing. Then we move into its demo and a use case to demonstrate report validation, followed by a quick Q&A session. And now I hand this over to Dave. Dave, the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Celia, and thank everybody for attending this webinar. We greatly appreciate your interest in DataGaps. So the first thing I'd like to do is really talk a little bit about what DataGaps is all about. And so as a company, we focus on that data journey from the point of ingestion into the enterprise, through your ETL processes that enrich the data, migrating the data into data warehouses and data marts, and then finally on the consumption of that data in your data analytics platform. So, that's the breadth of what we do as an organization. Today, we'll be focused on the back end of that, on the data analytics platform. And in our examples today, we'll be using BI Validator, our technology to validate your data analytics platform, and against Power BI. So a little bit about the market. There's some important trends in the market. One of them is that organizations have now 3.8 different business intelligence tool on average. A few years ago, that would have been much, much higher. So I think there's that consolidation that happens in the marketplace. And as you try to consolidate down to fewer number of business intelligence tools, BI Validator and DataGaps is focused on helping you do that through the BI validation testing. Also, the cost of bad data for the U.S. economy is $3.1 trillion each year. I think for an individual company, it averages out at about $23 million in terms of the cost of bad data for an individual company. Companies are spending a tremendous amount of money on business intelligence, anywhere from 50 million over the course of a number of years. Some of it even invested more than 500 million. But that investment, they're not reaping the complete rewards from that investment. And either the number one or two causes has to do with lack of adoption, because people haven't adopted that. And the number one reason for that is that people don't trust the data. They've been burnt in the past because of bad data quality, and so they don't trust the data. They also see that sometimes it has to do with poor performance, and then also being able or getting the wrong data when they're running their data analytics platform. So we focus on those problems and help organizations reap more reward out of their expenditures in business intelligence. So as an illustration, what could possibly go wrong, right? And unfortunately, there are a lot of things that can go wrong. In this particular BI or Power BI report, there are about 20 or 23 different visuals that are displayed here. There are 3 filters, there could be some slicers, all those kinds of things. And if you start to think about this and the combination of those things, there could be hundreds, if not thousands, of things that potentially can go wrong in this simple dashboard. So, testing of the business intelligence applications is certainly challenging, especially if you're doing it in a manual fashion. So the number of dashboards, the data elements, the number of reports that need to be verified, that adds complexity. If there's changes in the metadata, and that at times causes unintended consequences downstream in the data analytics platform. If the security models change or the underlying database, all these kinds of processes and many more affect and impact the validity of the information that you're providing out of the data analytics platform. So what we do is we help you focus on a lot of these either through regression testing, performance testing, upgrade testing is a big area that people call us about, stress testing to be able to see if we can put more people on the same application or the same servers, and then catalog testing to catch all of the myriad of problems that happen in the data analytics platform. As I'd mentioned, we focus on the end-to-end pipeline, the data journey, and starting with as it's being ingested all the way through to the point where it's being consumed. And so today we'll be focused on the right side of this diagram and BI Validator. BI Validator is a client-server implementation, and we install either on-prem or in your cloud, but behind your firewall, so we have no access to the data whatsoever. Some of the success stories that we've had over the course of time is one of the largest, or actually two of the top 5 Tableau implementations over the course of time are our customers. One of them has had an issue with the number of upgrades that they could potentially do, and there would be 3 or 4 or 5 upgrades a year, but they could only get to a couple of them because it was taking them 5 people for a month to do the testing of the upgrade. They used us. They came in and they cut that down significantly, and now they can do more upgrades with Tableau in this particular case. Let me talk a little bit about the architecture, and then I'll turn this over to Shubhanshu for the demo. So architecture, as I mentioned, is client server running in your environment, again, behind your firewalls. The way that you interact is it's a Windows-based application, and you interact with the client, the BI Validator client sitting in Windows. And you do things like connect to Power BI, maybe connect to a database, a number of things along those lines. And you create your test cases within BI Validator, the client. Information gets stored in a repository. And so all that information where you interact in the client, all that information gets stored in the repository. And then we layer in on top of, in the case today, on top of Power BI. And we invoke their procedures, we fire their functions, and we actually grab PDF versions of dashboards and reports and such, or sometimes we grab the underlying data as well. And some of that information gets stored back in the repository. There is a BI Validator server as well, and that is where you can schedule jobs for execution at a later point. You can do command line execution, so you can invoke procedures and test results from outside of BI Validator. And then if you want to provide a URL to individuals to view the results of the reports and the test, you can do that, and that's all contained as part of BI Validator server. So at this point, what I'd like to do is turn this over to Shubhanshu to start the demo. Thank you.
Dave, can you stop sharing? Thank you. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, Shubhanshu.
Yes.
All right, thank you. So let's get started with BI Validator. Once again, I'm Shubhanshu Dikshit, Product Manager in Data Gaps, and I'm going to be handling this particular demo. In this particular demo of BI Validator, we'll be focusing on the use cases of Power BI specifically. Note that this doesn't mean that we don't support any additional BI technologies. In fact, as Dave's showcased earlier, we have some of the biggest users of Tableau for our use case, which use our product as well. With that being said, our particular webinar, this one, is going to be about Power BI. All right, and this is Power BI. There are going to be three windows against which I'm going to be circling through. One of them is a diagram of the business use cases. The other one is a typical Power BI report. That's for understanding use cases. And we have 6 test plans that we're going to go through, which each of them pertain to a specific business use case that we want to resolve. So before we get to any of that, we would like to enhance and talk more on how exactly we connect to Power BI. So this is the home screen. We have our add connections, test plans, and run history, along with some graphs and some logs on the recently run test plans and also their results and their categories. The first thing we're going to focus on is connections. There are 2 types of connections within Power BI that we offer. The first one is the BI connection. And as you can see, we offer all the different types of BI connections directly. This is so that the application can pull reports and their corresponding data directly. But we also support DB connections. This will come in handy in one of our test cases where we would like to compare data against reports directly, and thus you can connect directly to databases which include, but not limited to, Snowflake, SQL Server, Oracle, Postgres, and such. There are also local files and files on server support right here. The way a connection is taken is quite simple. It only needs a specific credentials and a type of user that you're going to use. A quick remark on what exactly this does. Power BI is basically going to impersonate this user to run it or run all of its protocols. And what that implies, quick way to understand, is that something along the lines of row level security works inherently because of this implication. So here we have the user of Parinita right here. And this, if this user has access to a particular subset of a data, for example, you have a global data set where this user has access to only the USA data set. Power BI, this particular BI Validator application, will run with the assumption that that's the case. And this is, wow, it's going to come in later as well. This is how we actually validate whether or not a particular user has correct access or not. So, of course, just to not finish this up, we also want to check how exactly we connect to SQL Server. This is a typical credential system where you have to define your user passwords, host, and port name, along with the schemas you want to work with. Of course, every connection can be tested and validated before you move on. Now, let's go to the main crux of this demo, which is how exactly we tackle problems faced by the Power BI user for such cases. I'm going to pause for a while so that this complex report can be showcased in all of its glory. This is going to be in blog posts and other documentation that we will share with the application. But the main gist that this particular map does is that there are a few set of objectives we would like to cover as part of BI validation. And moving forward, I'm going to use an example that myself, I am a user of Power BI. I work in a team which have multiple reports, which we are developers as well as testers for a lot of reports of Power BI, and I am faced with a lot of problems. The first type of problem is going to be with regards to comparing reports against reports. Of course, we'll move against the other questions as well. How do I validate my report against data? How do I ensure that my report is validated against business rules as well? But in this particular sequence, we're going to go first with compare reports against report. So what's the business use case here? The assumption here is that you as a manager or you as a developer have reports that you create, but they are going to be similar or same reports created by either another team or created within other environments. This could be your dev environment, your pre-prod or prod. And one thing you'd like to ensure that your report as a whole needs to be exactly the same, or at least needs to be valid with regards to the text between your environments or within your teams. And this is where we use data compare test plan to validate this. And this is the first use case we'll actually be looking into. Going back to BI Validator, we go into test plans right here. And as you see, I have already created a bunch of test plans specifically for this use case. I'll minimize the other ones that are not needed so that we can focus on data compare. Data report to data is the one we'll move on next to, but first one is report to report. As you can see, we've already run this, but we'll start from scratch here. Start. Here you're given a choice to give certain names, what the type of comparison you're running with, what are different connections. If you have two distinct Power BI connections, one against dev and one against prod, you can define them right here. You can add labels so that eventually when you club all your test plans, you can run them all based on their labels and even distinguish them based on their labels. Advanced options is present just to ensure that how fast your corresponding computer can actually run these tests. In most cases, default settings are good enough because a few of these settings can be altered later if need be. And the most important aspect comes when you go to add reports. Here, as you can see, I've already selected a particular report. This report came in from this specific connection, from this specific user in this data space within reports. Just to show you guys what this report looks like in normal sense, this is my Power BI system where we have the specific report. This, as you can see, is a dev report. The business use case here is that I want to validate my dev against prod. And so the first report I'm going to plug in is the dev report. The next report, after I click next, that I'm going to plug in is the production report. Again, in this particular case, they are side by side, but in a more realistic use case, you could imagine there could be a different BI connection altogether that you would have to connect to get this report. Now, on first glance, of course, both of these look pretty similar, but that's where we go to our run system and see exactly what has gone wrong. I've already run this application first in lieu of time, and we see that the status has failed. A test plan being failed doesn't imply that there are errors. If that's the case, there would be an error pop-up. But here, you can actually go in and see exactly why a particular report has failed. Now, while this thing loads, I would like to elaborate more on how exactly the application works. So depending on text or appearance, the application is going to find out the differences within the reports, the two reports that we're talking about here. Here, since we are working with dev and prod, I see that, of course, the string dev and production itself is incorrectly matched, and therefore that is highlighted. And that is why you see an orange blob over it. Going down to the graphs, you'll see Asia Pacific remains on 4 million, which is the same in both the reports. But Europe is the one that has some concerning number changes, which is about 3.1 to 3.3. And this is what's being highlighted here as well. And this is our main crux of making sure that you can find that needle in the haystack, that you can find that specific issue which is causing problems. Of course, in this use case, we are going with a much more simpler report. If I full screen this, you'll see that the entire report is actually loaded in, and you can see other aspects that are problematic here as well. You see that there are aspects that are not found in here, such as same day versus class day. And that's why the test case has failed. This makes it very easy for a QA tester to actually work and figure out if this particular reports have some problems. If we just shift to appearance, the reason appearance comes into picture is if you're working with, say, geographical data, map data, pie charts, or any other aspects where text isn't the main focus of validation. This could also be color schemes during the system. That's where the appearance test comes into picture, and you can actually validate your reports. This time, you see there's a bar graph. That deficit is found out right here and being plugged into the system. One key pointer here, now that we have wrapped up the very basics of what BI Validator does, because this is a flow we'll go through again and again, is that once we select the reports or the datasets we want to compare, these tests are actually saved in run history. I can go to a specific run history and see exactly what happened in that specific run. And once I have done that, once I'm happy with the report, I can actually go and create a scheduling system or a notification system in case the test case fails. Note that in this particular case, we have added just one report. This is purely for better understanding. But in a real use case, you can add multiple reports within your application, which is going to be right here. All the reports will be loaded down right here, and you can run this at any time you want. So with that, we wrap up the very first test case, which is report to report. And quickly moving back to our system, to our objectives, apologies, we go to the next use case, which is, yes, now that I've validated my reports, but have I validated my report against my data? So what could be the business use case? Of course, I mean, a lot of folks can have this use case edged into a usual systems that they have, which is they have the reports which are going to be created on every Thursday or Friday, but their data set comes in every morning, and their data set might come in on Saturday as well. And there could be some aspects where the pipeline has run, but you're not so sure if the report actually is working against the data as well. I'm sorry, I see some questions. However, we have a dedicated time for the questions as well towards the last 10 minutes, and we'll take all the questions at that point. So going back to the main webinar, validating my report against data. In this case, again, going back to the business use case that we are trying to do, is that there could be use cases where I want to ensure that the aggregates or the stats that my reports are showing are actually valid against my data set itself. This could be to just cross-validate your reports, or this could be to ensure your reports do not deviate too much from real-time data. And in this particular case, we again go back to data compare test plan. But here, instead of going report to report, we will be going report to data. And that's what we have right here. Again, here the only difference is that the comparison type was report to query instead of report to report. Advanced options remain the same. And as soon as I go on add reports, if I click on this one, the first window is quite simple. Within this particular report, let me go to Power BI to have this illustrated better. Within this particular report in markets, I've ensured that I've taken care of this bar graph. The data set behind this bar graph is what I'm going to pick up, and I'm going to try to validate it. And to do that, I've basically picked up this particular report, and within that, I have picked up within the pages certain visual elements. Again, I've dragged and dropped them right here so that these records are populated on its own. The next thing I do, just to show how the application works, is create a query. This is where my DB connection comes into picture. Where I can actually have all the tables that I can connect to, and I can use the query builder either here or in the transform system to create a specific query. The reason this is a bulky query is just because Asia Pacific and APAC are different strings, and we just want to make sure those are the same right here. But what this emphasizes is that even if you have a complex query with user-defined functions in your application, you should be able to use the query builder and the transform systems to actually make sure that your corresponding query matches to what you want to do. So here you see the report and queries. We have already created this. The next step is going to transformation. Now, in transformation, again, query builder comes into picture. Here you can do more aliases, use more functions. We provide this in a two-step because we understand that the initial query could be the data prep phase, and the transform could be where you would want to maybe even transform the report queries. So if you're working with, say, a grade of data, you could do that there as well. And finally, mapping here works to ensure that your corresponding strings are actually done. In most cases, this is done automatically. However, we let the user change the data types or conversion formats for their own use case as well. Now, let's move to run and see exactly how this application looks. So, of course, we have created every test case to fail, and you'll see most of the test cases do fail. But why are these failing? The results here. If you click on view results, we get this summary window. We see that there have been about 4 unmatches and about 6 matches. Again, this can be exacerbated over thousands of records that could be seen in a typically large report, where you can actually see the sample records of what records were mismatched across the two. Here, Asia Pacific and Europe records are mismatched by a decent margin, and that is something that is being caught by the application. Going over to matched, we can actually see what are the matched records, and report A and report B, which is basically the query, actually shows the exact results of what was seen from that specific system. And of course, if I go back to run histories, I can actually keep track of if there were any mismatches seen in my past. And that's why run histories is also a powerful tool right here. Therefore, in this particular case, we have actually wrapped up the first two use cases, which is making sure that my reports are validated against reports and that my reports are validated against data. Now, we are going to skip this axis one right now for stress plan. We'll actually go to catalog plan, and then we'll move to report. As you can see, report test plan has a biggest chunk of our time dedication right here. But first, let's go to the format of my report has not been altered. So what do you mean by the format of the report here? It could mean anything from the mere aesthetics of the report, if there's a color change or if there's a text change, if something has changed. Or it could also mean that your bookmarks, your slicers, or anything within your visualizers has been altered. So how do we do this in our application? In this particular case, you go to start again. Everything here stays the same. You just define your connections. And here we come to benchmark. And before I move any further, I want to spend some time on what exactly benchmarking means in our application. A benchmark is basically a snapshot that is used for comparison with future runs. Once you define your benchmark, that is the value, or that is the data set, or that is the report against which all subsequent reports are going to be validated against. And so one thing that I want to clarify is that this is not a one-time thing. You can obviously, your benchmarks will improve and benchmarks will change from time to time. A simple use case would be that you update the graphics or the style of your report every 6 months, but your report is created every week. So using scheduling systems, you can actually make sure that you benchmark your report every 6 months, but your report is validated every 6 weeks. Oh, sorry, every week, every time it's actually created. Yeah. So here I've just picked up a couple of customer analysis SQLs. So these are my reports right here. I believe this is one of them. And this is a typical report of what you might see. It has a lot of visualizers, a lot of filters right here. And I've already benchmarked them. So after benchmarking them, I go to rules. And here I can actually see what are different views and aspects that I'm going to work against. And to better see how exactly this goes out, let me go to run first and see and tell you exactly what I've done. Between SF and SQL, these were identical reports. Just to showcase, I have actually gone in and moved the country, this particular element, ever so slightly up. That's it. That's all I've done. It's moved by a tiny pixel amount, and that's all I have done so far. And if I go back to my application and see view the differences right here, you'll see that everything is matching except for visual position of the country visual. The benchmark versus the results are slightly different. This exacerbated example is just to showcase that, yes, of course, there won't be cases where you might move elements in your report, but that could be the case as well. But more importantly, if any aspect of your report, whether it be aesthetic or metadata related, whether it be bookmarks, slicers, or visual related, we capture it. And then we ensure that benchmark is being validated against the original data set. And that's what we see right here. In case you had any bookmarks, in case I changed the filter of the particular application, that would be caught right here as well. And in this particular fashion, we can ensure that the application has its aesthetics, its reports, the entire format of its report is still kept valid. With that, we actually wrap up the third aspect, which is the format of my report. Now, well, going to the main aspect now, which is report test plan. So you see, we cover a lot of specific aspects right here, ranging from regression to logical fallacies to security. So I'm going to take a breather for a second. And now let's get started with the first aspect, which is me as a QA tester or a developer for Power BI reports. I want to ensure that through upgrade cycles or through development cycles, my report maintains its integrity. What could this mean? Well, anytime there's a change whether it's in your pipeline, whether it's within your system, the corresponding changes could trickle down to your reports. A regression or development cycle could also be much more drastic changes where you have development and production environments, and you need to ensure that the development and production environments actually match. The basis of regression is based on the aspect that you have a source of truth. And this is where report test plan comes into picture. So how do we do upgrade validation or regression validation using Power BI report test plan? Well, just to give reiteration, all you do is click on add new right here, select the BI tool you want to use, and click on the report test plan. I've already created this right here, and we're going to go to the regression test plan, how exactly this works. All right. Of course, here you will see that quite difference is that the first thing is that we have only one connection. This is because we're going to be using benchmarking here as well. We're going to benchmark a particular report, and the business logic is as follows. Let me go to add reports. You see, there's a production level report that I have. This production level report is something I've pulled in from my corresponding user right here from the demo data BI Validator data space. And this is going to be my basis against which I'm going to change. So the story here for the example story that we're going to go through is that I have a report in my production and I'm making certain changes to my report in development. And so I need to ensure that after my changes in development, even then, that these particular reports are actually valid. So how do we do this? First, I define my production level, my benchmark. I click on benchmark to ensure that this particular report is done. And you'll see that after this, there's just directly run. So here at this point, let me just go back to run right here. You'll see that this particular run has already failed. But if I try to click here, it's going to ask me to change connection. So what does this mean? So this means that if I have multiple versions within my development, so if I have, say, 3-4 versions that I'm trying to work against, I can actually run this test at once or repeatedly with different connections. Going back to our example, I have created a new report, store sales dev simple, and this is what I want to validate against. And so I run the system, and this is what it gives out. That okay, there are some concerns in there's something has failed. So within, if I click on page, I can actually go back and see the exact benchmark, the result view, and also the page differences. This reverts back to the original data compare that we saw, except this is with regards to regression, and this keeps track of your application of your benchmark. So instead of report to report planning, where you're just comparing two reports, you're actually comparing the same report against multiple reports, multiple iterations of reports, or multiple versions of the report. And thus, if you're going through upgrade cycles, whether it be production or dev, or if you're going to, upgrade cycles from one version to the other, or development cycles from production to dev, you can actually keep track of these set of reports and the differences. Of course, since this is the same report, we see the same problems pop up, which is the Europe data is incorrect ever so slightly. Of course, appearance will give us the same results that we saw earlier. In this particular fashion, we can actually run and check exactly what's going on. Of course, the main crux here is that if I click on change connection, it asks me, what is the report you want to check on this instead? So I can actually go in and add another report right here. If I just go on report, I can add this report once again, this application, by deleting this one first. And in this case, I can create multiple subpoints where the same report is going to be used as a benchmark, and then corresponding reports are going to be validated against it. So with that, we actually wrap up the fourth point, which is maintaining report integrity through upgrades and cycles. The next one is actually something that we see in much more common use cases as well, which is, okay, my report is being validated against data, my report is being validated against other reports as well as through cycles. But there's an aspect that only a human has to come into a picture to ensure that my reports are actually valid. I need to ensure that my reports are valid based on business rules. And I want to ensure that my report is valid based on logical fallacies. I am very aware that certain metrics can never be zero. I'm very aware that certain metrics are only decimals of certain significant digits. I'm also aware that a certain metric like sales can only lie between certain ranges and thresholds. And if anything is deviating from these parts, it's a huge miscall for me. I need to ensure that my report don't go out. So as a final layer of checking to ensure that there are no logical fallacies in your report, or there are business rules that are actually being validated before your report is sent out, we provide this functionality as well in the same test case, which is report test plan. So here, I'm going to go to the functional test plan, which is in my work area right here. Now, note that this is also a report test plan itself, and you could club a lot of tests together in one specific test plan. The only reason we have segregated this is for better understanding. But as you see, as soon as I go on, click and add report, I can actually add specific reports right here. I can add multiple reports as well. But here in this particular case, I'm going to drill down on our original example, where I'm going to go through a particular page. I'm going to go through the sum of sales by market. If you remember, let me just go back here. This is the metric that we want to validate things against. And so I click right here, and this is the data I go in. So here, of course, I have filters, I have data sets. I can do a lot more aspects. If we really get into the nitty-gritty parts, I can apply a lot more rules on specific aspects as well. But here, I'm just going to go through assertions. Here, I can use a query builder to create specific rules for my data set. Note that this particular query builder is actually a pretty powerful tool for me, because I can just drag and drop specific things and add attribute rules for any specific column right here. This could be anything as a null check. This could be a date check. This could be a numerical check, a regular expression, range check, having values, date between certain values, the length of a particular character, everything that you might want to consider. And the reason we provide this is we understand that a lot of times you might not want to have experienced SQL developers or that experience within your QA tester. So even if you don't have that experience, or just for the sake of ease of your use, we provide query builders with the other application as well, to ensure that it's an easy way for you to create these rules. So I've already created a few of these rules. I'm just going to click cancel. I'm just going to go through a few of these rules. First, the first rule is just ensuring that there are no negative sales, because I am sure of that. The second one is null check. The third one is a business rule one, where I am very confident that my market range is going to be between these two values. Now, a quick sideline before we get into much deeper aspects. The rules that we have created and these other aspects, everything has parameterization built in. We have not shown that because it would be a bit more complex for the user to follow towards the end for the first time user. But every other aspect that you see within filters, within variants, has specific rules associated with them. But again, for the sake of time, we are going to ensure that we skip those and we focus on the basics. But rest assured, every aspect that you see has a complex counterpart to it as well. And so if you want to get in very deep, you want to create a specific rule for a specific bookmark, for a specific subterranean where you want to ensure this rule is created, it is possible and it's feasible through a combination of the filters, the variants that we click on, as well as the assertions. We're going to skip security access because it's part of the next point. But so far, if we go to run right here, we'll see. Let me just not show this. Let me just, not give spoilers, but okay. Our reports have failed. Again, this is expected. Within reports, I can actually check why something has failed. So I see something has failed in page 1. Everything else seems good. My sum category, my sales of sum of sales by segment category, everything looks fine. But in this particular market, I see going to assertions, everything is fine. The status is passed. There's no difference between the benchmark and the original. Sorry, benchmark and the new one. But in the rules, I see that yes, there are a couple of, there's one rule that has failed, which is the expected range. And if I go deeper in there, I can actually see the exact results, the exact query that was used, and the number of good records and bad records seen. Again, this is a hyper simplified use case. I understand that in reports, you can obviously get way more complex and you have complex aggregates as well for your reports. But rest assured, we have tackled these problems in past with a lot of our clients, and we have done the same. And for the sake of this particular demo, we are going a bit more simple. Now, so let's go back to our main crux, which is our objectives for BI validation. And so far, we have wrapped up most of them. Let's go to the final two, which is manage access control to my reports. Now, this is where row level security, principal accounts, and other aspects come into picture. So a little bit of background, just to rehash what I've said earlier. The way the BI Validator works is that when you create a particular user for it, it's going to use those credentials to log into the BI and work through it. It's going to run its scripts against that. And so it's going to impersonate that particular user. Therefore, just to repeat, if you are a user who does not have access to a specific data set, so in my business use case, I'm going to use Greenland. I have access to Greenland dataset. I should not be able to see Greenland dataset. That's a very simple thing. But the checks are along the same lines, where the checks that I've created in my functional use case here, security access, the one that has passed is where I actually check whether in my records, whether I have certain market, where market is like Greenland. Anything related to Greenland, I want to ensure that I cannot see it. And therefore, that's why this particular record has passed. But going back to security from a different angle in this particular case, we also have this particular use case where we have service principal account connectivity. So if you're in a system where you're actually using Power BI in a pay for capacity system, you can actually check which users are actually accessing which records to the application as well. But skipping over that, going to the final aspect, which is this one, I want to make sure that my reports are accessible quickly with low failure rates and load times. So the main reason for this is that if you're working with Power BI reports, especially in huge enterprises, the number of reports skyrocket pretty quickly as soon as development starts. Of course, this is also proven by the few of our clients. Our top users have workbooks and reports ranging about 20,000 with users about 50K. We have dealt with these kind of clients as well, where we have, basically we have dealt with problems that our clients have in the specific situations. So what do we do in this particular case? Of course, Power BI comes in with an enhanced optimizer, which you can use. But how do you validate whether or not your particular reports are validated here or not? So let's go to this particular stress plan right here. The report is already made, but I would like to, do this once again, just for the showcase and explain the process. So firstly, you define the connection you want to go against. And here you basically you define the simulation parameters against which the stress test is going to run. You define how many users are going to access the report over the course of how long. How long are they going to stay on a particular report itself? What's the ramp up time? And how long are they going to move out? Of course, we have SLA and other timeout section here as well, with the stress load being random or distributed here as well. Now, user with part, there are also configure users here. Again, this is all just to make sure you can better simulate the rush that will come in. And what's the rush that we're talking about? Let me just define. The report is already picked up. Employee analysis is not very complex, but it's fairly large and has a lot more elements into it. This is there to better exacerbate how exactly stress tests might work. And of course, we already have this run, but let me just quickly run this again and show you how exactly the application works, where exactly this would work. So a use case that we have seen quite often with the stress test is that in many marketing departments where you have a lot of sales personnel, you're going to have this particular problem where on Monday morning, where as soon as the new weekly reports come in, everyone is going to access those reports all at once. This is going to cause a lot of a lot of stress on the Power BI side itself. And if you're doing going for pay for capacity, it's going to have a stress on that front as well. But most importantly, it's going to result in the end user having a bad experience in terms of the fact that they could get timed out, bad experience in terms of the fact that they could be logged out, or they could have time, or that they could not access the reports in the meantime. Of course, this could be a hyper specific example when we talk about financial sectors and all the reports that are needed on that. But to any department, you need to ensure that your reports are optimized. And what you see right now, what has happened is, since I've run a 1 minute test, 1 or 2 minutes test, as soon as the first results have come out, the page gets refreshed automatically, and it shows us exactly how the application is working. We have a lot of statistics here that we're working with on how many runs, how many user attempts have failed, how many have faced SLA timeouts, how many aspects, how much time did each run take, how many requests were sent. And using this application and going into details of this application, this particular test case, a developer can ensure that he or she has created and well optimized report, Power BI report at the end of the day. Yeah, and I think that's it. We're almost done with this particular report as well. So yes, we see that, yes, we have runtimes for specific reports, and each elements, how much time it takes for each element to be imported. And thus you can add this up and actually show the end user that, okay, at the end of the day on Monday morning, when you have, say, around 500 users accessing your BI report, you can ensure on Friday night itself that there won't be any problems with regards to the optimization of the corresponding report. Of course, the problem gets 10 times more complex once you take into account that there are some reports which are accessed by 1,000, 10,000 users all at once as well. So with that, let me go back and have a simple recap on what we have done so far. As part of our objectives, me as a BI developer or tester have ensured that we as a team can compare reports against other reports, be it from other teams using other connections, or being within the same team but within different environments. If I want to do that specifically, that's report against report. I also ensure that my report is valid against a data set, be it any data, be it an aggregated data set or data sets after a bunch of aggregations or functions applied to them. I can also apply functions to my report data set and thus ensure that at any point, even the aggregates and even functions results match. I do this using data compare test plan. The next thing I went through was catalog test plan. This is where I ensure that the metadata as well as the aesthetics of my report are not altered in any means. This means that filters have not been changed, the position of reports have not been changed, or something as simple as ensuring that your company report that is being sent out to, say, stakeholders or that's being sent out to clients is consistent throughout. And irrespective of any dev making even a small, tiny mistake of changing the element, even moving the element even a little sideways, or changing the color a little bit, or even changing a filter that no one even uses, you can still keep track of it and catch it beforehand, maintaining the consistency that your company has with regards to the reports you send out. After that, we went through the report test plan. This actually took care of a plethora of my use cases. The first one being maintaining in report integrity. This is ensuring that through upgrades and through development cycles, I can still make sure that my base report is valid. So even if I go through multiple changes through my development cycle, I can still validate it against one set benchmark, be it from developments or be it from upgrades. I also ensured that I can validate my reports against functional requirements or logical fallacies. Something as simple as making sure my reports does not have null values, to something as more complex, where I can actually define ranges or define certain set values to my reports and actually validate the report itself for business requirement checks. Finally, I have a quick check to ensure that not the, if I have a bunch of users, me as a manager who manages a bunch of these teams, and I can ensure that when I impersonate users, I can ensure that my data sets are actually segregated properly with regards to RLS, that we actually make sure that the certain users cannot have access to other records. I've ensured this as well. And finally, what I've ensured is that my reports are well optimized and validated with regards to the optimization, so that before my report actually gets that heavy rush of users that it might get on certain types, I can actually ensure that the system, the entire Power BI system, will be fine in this particular case. So with that, we have done with the particular demo. A few key pointers that I want to make sure that everyone is aware of in this point is that throughout the report, going back to this particular application, I've showed how exactly one report is made. But the quick aspect here is that you might not have to make every report on your own by clicking them repeatedly. We have scripts and automation systems in place that actually automate this process for you as well. So we have those aspects, and that apply to every other aspect as well. So this is not something that's specific to just report to report or report to data or functional test plan. This is something you can actually do on a multiple places, where you can create, basically create this test plan exports that you can import through multiple tests. So you can create templates that you can work through, and thus you can automate this particular system once you have created a template of what you would require. Finally, just to showcase one final aspect, a scheduler here just keeps tracks of all the runs that you've done. These are the production runs, not the testing runs, on the different types that you've run over the course of a month or a day, and so on. You can even have different test plan types that we can get into in subsequent specific demos. And a quick sneak peek at the admin options actually reveals the more deeper aspects, that we do have a password vault in our system. We have ALM connections to do something similar to CI/CD. We have SMTP and other server systems as well. And we have other configurations and email templates that you can create right here. So with this, going back to the main problem, I would like to end the particular demo with this following thought, that in case there are any specifics that you would like us to get into, if you believe that there are questions that we might not have answered, or questions that we could not answer in this QA section that is upcoming, feel free to contact us at any point, because we'll be more than happy to have another demo session which is a bit more personalized to your specific use cases, and then we can deep dive and see how exactly BI Validator can be used for your Power BI reports. So yeah, I guess that's it. Thanks a lot. And I guess we can go back to the QA section now.
Thanks, Shubhanshu. While you take a quick breather, I'll try to bundle up a couple of questions from the Q&A session. We see that Dave has been answering a couple of queries already, but just to make sure we are all recording this, we'll just read out those questions for the audience as well. Okay, so the first question, it says, are the test cases predefined, or are those customizable?
Yes, as Dave answered, these are customizable, and that's what we wanted to show, that even if you want to go through hyper-specific customization, it's definitely allowed. And in fact, we actually ensure that if there is a use case that cannot be covered within these 4 test plans, we are more than happy to work with you and create something specific, if that's the thing. But in our experience and across the multitude of clients, these 4 test cases cover most of the bases.
Okay. Another question. Can I validate dashboard T to T-1 and make sure data has not changed since yesterday?
Yep, as Dave has answered, this is why we have the benchmark system in place. You can either use the report test plan, or I think the data compare would also work if you have both the reports, but report test plan is ideal for this because it has the benchmark capabilities for this exact use case.
Great. Yeah. So next one. Can this tool be hosted on the cloud? Yes, we do that. Dave, anything that you want to add there?
Yeah, you can install either on-prem or in the cloud, and it's behind your firewall. We don't have any access to the software or the data for security reasons.
Okay, thank you. Another question from the user. Can I validate a filter values like the values in filter as same in dev and prod, or it won't show blank values?
Yes, we can actually do that. I hope I can actually show it right away. I need to make sure that there's a showcase plan for that. So within this case, so when we go to a specific report, if I go back to run right here and view in the results, oh, apologies, this is okay. So that will be in report test plan, my bad. Let's go back to run. That's why it pays to have things run already. So here within specific things, you see I have filters right here. So here filters have actually passed. So what this implies is that between the 2 specifics, dev and prod, the filters are identical and there are no filter differences. So yes, we can do that.
Another question related to data migration, basically. What shall be the strategy to automate BI report validation post a data migration from SQL Server to Oracle?
Oh, that is a loaded question. And Dave, you can feel free to pitch in here.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, well, so what happens when you migrate to a different database? Part of it is you want to validate that the migration went well, right? That's all the data ops suite. That's part of what that functionality is in the data ops suite. But then what you typically have is your data analytics platform porting to the old database, and now you're going to point it to the new database, and you want to validate that you're getting the same or the expected results that you were prior to the migration. And that's an easy use case for us to do. That's something that people do all the time, where they'll take a snapshot of a particular report against the old database, and now run that same report against the new database, and do the comparisons that Shubhanshu has shown you, and point out any deltas or any differences between the two.
Great, thank you. Just to add, DataOps Suite is one of our premium products, which helps users with ETL validation, data quality monitoring, and data flows as well. Great. So the next question, how to tackle false positives in validation?
So I guess I think the first easy one was with regards to dev and prod itself. I assume that this is one of the ones that you were showcasing, where this is a false positive in the sense that, yes, of course, there's going to be a specific difference between these two. But to answer your question in a bit more depth, I believe false positives can be applied, can be avoided simply by making sure that the filters and the other aspects that we are making before we actually create this. So if you go back to report to data, where we have certain queries that we're building, or regression test planning, where we can actually choose at the very start what types of checks we want to do. So in this case, if I wanted to ensure that I'm doing a complete PDF check versus filters check or not, I can actually validate that beforehand, and thus we can actually go for positive how we tackle positive validations and positive fake false positives in validation. Apologies, I've been speaking for a while. But yeah, however, I think Anand, yes, this is a question we would like to tackle on a more personal basis as well, because we would like to know exactly what type of examples would really help here. So feel free to get in touch with us and we can dig deeper at this current problem.
Great. So the last one, any special module for report testing post data migration?
I would say the special one is with regards to regression itself. I think that's the module that we have for migration, because it keeps track of the original and the target, basically the one that you migrated from and to, where your from will be your benchmark. And since migration is a long drawn process, as Dave mentioned earlier, this is going to take you multiple mappings, and thus regression test plan is the one where you define in this particular, say in this system, you define your source, and before you run, you keep changing your connections to ensure that you're connecting to the right other subsequent connection as well. And that in that particular way, you can ensure that even through data migration, you're validating this. Of course, one quick pointer I want to mention here, that while this is specific to BI, with regards to data migration validation, we have a complete separate tool set for that, which is the DataOps Suite ETL Validator. So data migration is something that we tackle as well. But this question answer was especially with regards to BI validation post data migration.
Thanks, Shubhanshu. We still have a couple of more minutes. Shubhanshu, do you want to throw some light on the supported features from the diagram?
Oh yeah. So yeah, I mean, just to just wrap this up with the final this particular screen itself, the supported features are, and this is actually a something that comes up quite often on how exactly can our application use this or do that. That is, firstly, do we support row level security? Yes, that comes in naturally with regards to the impersonation system that we use. The second one, the most common use case, is paginated reports. And of course, in paginated reports, we can actually dig deeper, where if you are absolutely confident that the format never changes, you can only run text level checks. This is also a bit faster to ensure that your application is running more faster. And if you have those hundreds of reports, you can do only text level and data level checks to ensure your paginated reports are actually working. And we have special modules for that. The third one is with regards to service principal account, which is, as I said earlier, if you're in that position where you are paying for capacity, which could be the case for a lot of folks here, in that particular case, we can actually dig deeper and see what's the exact use case for this set of users, how much exactly are these set of users costing overall in that particular use case. Then ALM connectivity is to ensure that there's a good connectivity system. Of course, the application comes with built-in APIs, so that you don't have to even run this on its own. You can actually call an API to run this, and that's why we have ALM connectivity as well as a substitute for that. And finally, quick big question is usually with regards to bookmark slides. As we saw in the questions itself, we do have bookmarks, sliders, visualizers, and every other complex use case that you can think of, since this application is live for quite a while, and we had a lot of feature requests that have already been implemented and improved on. So yeah, I think that kind of concludes most of it. And once again, if there are any specific questions, feel free to ping us on that, or contact us, because we'll be more than happy to delve deeper on how exactly we can improve this product for that specific use case itself. So yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for that.
Well, I want to thank everybody for their attention. A lot of good questions, a lot of value that we add to organizations. As you mentioned, there is a trial version. We also do specific demos for an organization. And the way we approach business is we like to have a discovery call with an organization to find out their specific pain points. And then we try to customize a demonstration to that organization based upon their pain points, where today was more of a general presentation, but we do demos that are more specific to their needs and requirements. So feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to respond and work out a time for a specific demo for your organization. And we thank you for your time today. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much, Dave, and Shubhanshu as well. And thanks everyone for joining us for this demo today. Please do keep in touch if you have any queries or need a personal demo for you and your team as well. Thank you again. Bye. Good day.